Good morning, everyone. Welcome to ArtsBeat TV and radio here on Westfield Community Programming Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. And today we're going to be chatting with two local people who have made national headlines for their work in the arts. Our first guest is Hailey Brinnel, who grew up in Longmeadow, Massachusetts, started a music career as a musician, as a singer, and has just been nominated as a finalist for one of the most important jazz awards in the country. Good morning, Hailey.
Good morning.
Nice to meet you. I know that you started performing in Longmeadow with your dad, who I know quite well. And how did your career take off from Longmeadow to now being a finalist in the Sarah Vaughan Jazz Competition?
I now live in Philadelphia. I went to school at Temple University. I came to Philly for their jazz program. And really, it was the experience going to school at Temple and starting to form my own groups, which was definitely highly informed by having played with my dad for so long. It made it a lot easier when I got to Philadelphia to sort of figure out how to start my own ensembles.
Where did you start learning music? Did you learn it from your dad, who we should probably tell people is Dave Brinnel, who is a singer and pianist, and he performs in many places around the 413?
Sure, and people might also know him as Dave in the Morning. I'm not sure if that's still a name that people recognize.
Oh, I think they do. And I run into him very frequently at Starbucks in the morning. So he's Dave at Starbucks in the morning to me, but we won't tell him that.
Oh, good. Yeah, and he won't listen to this, so.
He might. He's been on the show several times, so he just might. So what made you do, at what point did you say, hey, I got to do this?
Well, I remember from a pretty young age, I actually, before I had aspirations of performing mainly, I wanted to be a music teacher when I was probably 9 years old. And I started taking lessons, piano lessons at age 6, drum lessons at age 10, trombone at age 10, I think. My timeline might be off. But yeah, it was the combination of knowing I wanted some sort of career in music, and then my parents helped me by allowing me to study so many different instruments and voice lessons. I'd say by the time I went to college, I knew that I was going to be doing something in the performing world.
And you ended up doing singing and trombone. What made you choose that instrument and vocal versus some of the other things you learned along the way?
For drums, I loved my drum teacher. Is still one of my favorite instructors I've ever had, Billy Arnold. He always taught at the community music school in Springfield. I'd been taking drum lessons for about 6 years, and he stopped me one day and said, "What are you looking to do? You're doing a lot of different things. Like, what's in the future?" And then I asked him to weigh in, and he basically said, "You're a solid drummer, but I feel like your heart is with trombone and singing, and that's what you got to do to, make a name for yourself." And that's the first person that expressed that to me, and that really meant a lot, especially at a young age.
Who were some of the teachers along the way with trombone and with singing that really coached you to get to where you are now?
Sure. The main voice teacher I studied with was Peter Thompson, who lives in Longmeadow. And I went into college as a vocal major, did one semester of a classical, classical solo repertoire for voice. But for trombone, I actually studied mainly classical as well with Michael Oft, who is the father of Toby Oft, who is the principal trombonist of the Boston Symphony. I studied with Blair Bollinger, who is the bass trombonist for the Philly Orchestra, Jared Antonacci out here in Philly, who is a great freelancer. But it's actually funny you mentioned teachers, because mostly with my trombone and singing, I've studied classical until basically halfway through college. I switched to jazz lessons on trombone, so a lot of that was self-taught.
Well, I've done a little bit of singing, enough that people have adapted my song style to smoke detectors and stuff. But making the transition from classical to jazz is a really tough type of transition to make because classical is so regimented and jazz is involving so much innovation.
Yeah, and I think it helped in a lot of ways. I also can't neglect to mention I've been listening to jazz music, and the type of music I play now, especially like Great American Songbook standards, which is my forte. That's what I've been listening to since I was a young kid. So it was already somewhere in me when I went to start playing it. So it was pretty natural when I started actually digging into it. But I really appreciate with classical study that technique is really emphasized, as you said, that regimented practice. So I sort of had the work ethic that I was expected to as a classical musician. And then when I started going into jazz, it was easier because I had the technical skills and I had to just kind of learn a new language.
Prior to the pandemic, did you do a lot of live performance?
Yes. Oh, I miss it so much. But yeah, I was performing, 2 or 3 times a week out here around Philly or the surrounding area.
And you actually came back at one point and did a concert with your dad. I can't.
Yes.
Maybe a year ago, I think. But with the pandemic, is that when you decided to record the album that you have coming up early next year?
Actually, no. It was kind of fortuitous. I recorded that album all last year in the summer and fall, and I was originally planning on releasing it in the spring of 2020. But the world had other plans. So I had everything recorded, and when the pandemic hit, everything was being mixed and mastered by Turtle Studios out here in South Philadelphia. And, the pandemic kind of put everything on pause, which ended up, in terms of the record, being kind of fortuitous because I ended up linking up with a record label out in New York that's now helping me put it out. So it's delayed until 2021, but I'm putting it out the right way.
So what's the name of the album?
I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles.
And your dad sent me a couple of clips from it. We're going to play one at the end of the program. But what are some of the songs on it that you're choosing to showcase?
Well, the first 2 singles that you can listen to on whatever streaming platform you use or buy them on iTunes were Orange Colored Sky and Easy to Love, the Cole Porter tune. Some other ones I'm excited about. The titular track, I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles, is a song from 1918 that people have mostly forgotten about. That's kind of the theme of the album, is trying to meld together some more classic standards. Like I have Stardust is another song I have on the album that people might know. And some more forgotten things like I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles, or I have this song, What's the Use of Getting Sober, which was a Louis Jordan tune that some people actually might know from Joe Jackson covered it.
Yeah, one of the ones I heard was Orange Colored Sky. I knew I heard it as a kid somewhere. It was totally out of my thoughts, but I must have heard it at some point because I remember the Wham Bam Alakazam. I don't know where it came from my childhood, but there it was.
And that's similar to what happened with me in the song. I had more or less forgotten about that song, and then I had a guitarist ask me if I sang it. And then I had this vivid memory pop into my head of my gram and my dad at the piano, just messing around with that song when I was a lot younger. So it sticks in your head.
So how did the people at the Sarah Vaughan Festival find you?
Well, I applied. It was hundreds of people sent in submissions for this festival, which I'd applied for one other time in college, and I didn't make it past the first round. But I decided to submit some of my songs and videos that I had from the album, and out of the hundreds of submissions, they decided they wanted me to be one of 5 finalists.
That's great. So you're a finalist now, and when do they decide who wins?
In the end of March. I want to say the 21st. It's whatever the one that Sunday in March is. We're actually doing something at NJ Pack, which is a huge venue in New Jersey, and there will be a live final show, and they'll decide that day based on our performances.
If you get it, or even if you don't get it, when the pandemic ends and it's okay for audiences to socially distance and performers to be able to go live again, do you like to tour? Do you want to take your show on the road?
I would love nothing more. I haven't done a real tour. I've done, uh, trips where I do like a gig or two, but I've never done a formal tour with my own group. So I would love nothing more than to go around and play festivals in different venues in different cities.
Do you have the in the back of your mind? Do you have a song list or that you'd like to put together for a tour?
I have an ever-growing note on my phone whenever I think of a song that I have a really good arrangement idea for. But I would love to take this album set on the road with the quartet that I recorded with, because it's such a fun group of songs, and that group of musicians is just so inspiring to play with.
Who are some of the people that were involved? I mean, the orchestrations, the arrangements, and all that are just perfect.
Oh, thank you, because that was I did the arrangements. All the arrangements are my own, with of course my bassist Joe Plowman, and my piano player Silas Irvine. They would meet with me, and we'd try some of the arrangements, and they would give me input sometimes. But the arrangements are mine, but they really helped me sort of bring everything into its final form. And then Dan Monahan plays drums on the album. He's a Philly institution as a drummer.
Yeah. Do you find it difficult to sing and play the trombone? I mean, does it use your voice and your breathing in a different way, or can you slip easily back and forth between the two?
That's a great question. Um, in a lot of the ways, switching from vocals to trombone can be harder because as a brass player, if your muscles aren't totally ready to play the instrument, there can be some funny sounds that come out. Um, so going from singing to trombone can be a little tricky sometimes. From trombone to singing is actually wonderful because you're forced to use your breath in such a efficient way on trombone that when I go to sing after, it feels lovely.
Yeah. How many songs ultimately are on this particular album?
There are 8 total.
Did you record more and then decide that you needed to whittle it down to 8, or were those the 8 that you planned?
Those were the 8 that we had planned from the beginning. Originally, actually, it was going to be an EP. It was going to be a shorter album, and then I added songs at our second session.
So, if this comes to fruition and this album takes off all over the place, is there album number 2 in the wings?
Oh, 100%. Again, I keep such meticulous notes of any idea I have. So yeah, I already have a lot of ideas for the next one, including some original songs, because the ones I'm releasing now are all covers of jazz standards. But yes, very much album number 2 is already in the works.
Now, when you perform with your group around, do you perform a lot of original stuff, or do you kind of a mix?
I do mostly Great American Songbook, jazz standards, I guess jazz covers, some might call it. I have a few original tunes, but I mostly like to focus on the jazz standards.
Yeah. Who are some of the composers that you like performing the most when you look at a list of standards?
Wow, that's such a good question. Cole Porter is a favorite of mine. The way he crafts a melody. Jerome Kern. Trying to think. Sometimes I don't think in terms of the composer, so it's hard for me to. I know right after this interview it'll come to me.
Yeah, when you look at a piece of music, does the trombonist think about it first, or the singer?
I always tend to think about everything through a vocal standpoint first, especially if it's a song with lyrics and with a message like that. I tend to think about it as a vocalist first, but that's also how I learn any song. Even if I'm learning it as a trombonist, I'll always learn how to sing something first before I play it, because then it really gets in your ear and you know that you know it.
Yeah, I was just curious because the both are so disparate until you bring them together in a recording. But when you hear a piece of music, what do you think? Oh, I could play that, or I could sing that. I'm always curious which comes first.
Yeah, usually singing for me.
So, I mean, you're picking songs that have great lyrics. Is it the melody or the words?
They're both so important. There's some great examples, like a song where the melody's pretty simple, like "Smile" by by Charlie Chaplin. Is a song I love to perform, and the melody isn't. It's a great melody, but it's not fancy. It's not like performing a Thelonious Monk melody or anything. But the words are just so well crafted that it makes it interesting. So I think there definitely has to be a balance and compensation if one thing is more simple.
Yeah, you've chosen to live and work and base in Philadelphia, which has a great music scene. Down the road, is this a place that you're going to want to continue to work, or are there other jazz capitals around the world that you'd like to be a part of?
Well, I want to travel everywhere, ultimately. But as a home base, I've come to really love Philadelphia. It's has an amazing music scene, but it's small enough that we have a really great sense of community that goes on in Philadelphia that might be harder to achieve in some other cities that there's either a lot of musicians running around or just so many people.
Hailey, we're going to take a break to acknowledge the underwriters that make programming like ArtsBeat possible. Before we do you have a website people can go to take a look at your stuff?
I do. It's HaileyBrinnel.com, HaileyBrinnel.com.
Okay, and if you're watching us on YouTube or TV, her name is under her photo and just add a .com at the end. Peter Coles is our chief engineer this morning. I'm Mark Auerbach. We're broadcasting from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy. We'll be right back as soon as we thank some of our underwriters.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Westfield Bank. For more than 160 years, Westfield Bank has been an important community presence and commercial leader in the Pioneer Valley. With convenient full banking services in Westfield, West Springfield, East Longmeadow, Agawam, Feeding Hills, Springfield, Southwick, as well as Enfield and Granby, Connecticut, visit us on the web at westfieldbank.org.
Support for community radio on WSKB is provided by Betts Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years, specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. On the web at bettsplumbing.com or at 14 Coleman Avenue in Westfield.
Join me, Tina Gorman, each week from 6 to 8 a.m. for Wake Up Wednesday, when my guests and I discuss health, wellness, and lifestyle reimagined.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to ArtsBeat, everyone. I'm Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. We're chatting with Hailey Brinnel, who's a musician, Longmeadow native, who's gone on to bigger and better things. She is a finalist in the Sarah Vaughan Jazz Competition. We're going to know about that in March, just a couple of months after she releases a new CD of jazz standards. We'll play one for you at the end of the program. And coming up in the second part of ArtsBeat today, Springfield native Carl Bartels was a photographer and budding cinematographer and filmmaker. So he left Springfield to go to Hollywood and has really had a great career out there in Hollywood. I'm going to be excited to be chatting with him. But right now it's with Hailey Brinnel. Hailey, in terms of the record, the CD that you've done, is this the first recording that you've done, or is it the first of your own?
This is the first of my own. I have some things I've done for other people, or I've been on like a compilation album where one track was mine, but then other people had them. This is the first thing I can really call my own.
And how long did it take you from the time that you decided you want to do it to the time you actually got it recorded and into production?
Well, I think I decided that I was set on recording a record probably April 2019. I set my first recording date for August of last year. I finished the arrangements probably 3 days before the first recording session. And it was finished, the recordings were finished by October 2019.
Where did you record it?
I've recorded half of the tracks, or three of the tracks, I should say, in Sherry Miracle, who's a drummer. She leads a group called the Diva Jazz Orchestra. She's an absolutely wonderful, world-renowned drummer. She had a venue in Philly that I used to run a jam session at that has wonderful acoustics. So Turtle Studios came out and did a remote session at her venue for 3 tracks, and then the other 5 were at Turtle Studios in South Philly.
Okay, and did you do the editing, or did you have people come in and help you with that?
Oh, no, I had people that are much better at that than I am. It was Sean Savadlanak, which if anyone's ever recording or doing anything that they have to send out, he is incredible. He mixed my album, and then Doug Rouse mastered it.
That's terrific. And once it goes out there, I mean, people could, I guess, download it wherever they want, really.
Yeah, it'll be on every platform you can possibly imagine, including I'll put things out on Bandcamp as well. I'll sell direct from my website. And if you go to the website, I'm going to have some deals with some merchandise as well. That'll be offered.
I guess the music business is different than when your dad or I were starting out, where you had to record the album, which might have been on tape or might have been an album or whatever, and then push it by going from one disc jockey to another in the hopes that they might play it and it might get some airplay. But it's all different now, huh?
Yeah, and I still, the record label I work with, it's Outside in Music. They're going to be helping me to send packages out to radio stations, so that still does happen. But a lot of things have to do with streaming algorithms on Spotify, and it's very different. Also, I respect any musician who's recorded on tape primarily throughout their career. I did it one time, and it was the most stressful experience of my entire life.
I bet. But in the way that you recorded it, this album, you could go back and re-record things that you didn't like, correct?
Oh, of course. Yeah, that was, anyone that records an album, I hope can do that nowadays if they're not doing a live recording. But yeah, we definitely went back and fixed some stuff we weren't happy with.
Yeah, because I would imagine if you were recording Hailey Brinnel live at Madison Square Garden, concert from beginning to end, and there was a chord you didn't like or something like that, it's like when we do radio, it's really difficult to go back in and fix something to the minute and the second versus just letting it play out. So I would assume you get the opportunity to perform live for an audience, but you give up the total control of that note versus that note.
Exactly. That is what's thought of as the pros and cons of live performing.
Yeah.
Live recording.
Do you think that any of your music or any of the stuff that you're working on, original or otherwise, might be something that would be appropriate as a soundtrack for a screenplay or something more than your troupe or your ensemble performing?
For screenplays, if someone's looking for something that sounds very much like a 1940s jazz standard, I got it. But that's my aesthetic is pretty much rooted in that. So if anyone wants some background music for a very nostalgic project, then I can do it.
Yeah,
but,
so you're sticking with the jazz big broadcast era of music at this point.
It's just what gives me the most joy. So it's where I'm most comfortable.
If you're driving around somewhere or a couple of hours to kill or something like that, what kind of music do you listen to?
So many different things. I listen to a lot of newer pop music that integrates sort of like funk elements. Like there's a group called Wolfpack. There's a group called Lawrence I love in terms of new music. Because it's important to, even if you listen, especially if you're playing music from the 40s or, decades past, to also know what's going on nowadays as a point of reference. It's also very discouraging when I listen to only people that I can't see tour anymore.
Yeah.
But for jazz, I listen to a lot of, again, anyone that covered Great American Songbook standards. I love listen to big band, the Kenton Band, Thad Jones, Mel Lewis. I listen to a ton of Ella, Jasmine horns, Cecile McLaurin Salvant for vocalists, a lot of different things.
If you were able to have a dinner party and somebody else will cater it and pay for it, so don't worry about that, but you can have any 3 musicians that you've listened to over the years sit around and just chat, who would you want to have dinner with?
Oh, wow. Alive or dead?
Alive or dead. I mean, for me, it would be Stephen Sondheim. I would just want to sit there and chat with him. And but are there any among the jazz idiom that you would just love to hang out with?
Well, I'm trying to think of. I would be so curious to sit down to dinner with Thelonious Monk. I think that he is one of the most interesting characters in jazz music, although I'm not sure what we'd have to talk about. But that would definitely be interesting. For people that are still alive, I would be so happy to meet Stevie Wonder. That would be so up there for someone that I'd love to meet. Betty Carter, maybe, vocalist Betty Carter. I would love to hear, talk with her.
She's great. Can you find jazz that you like on the airwaves, or do you pretty much have to make up your own playlists?
No, there's, especially out here, WRTI out in Philly plays a lot of different jazz music that I love. There's a lot of great new big bands putting out music. Again, Diva Jazz Orchestra has a recent album. I said actually Jasmia Horn and Cecile McLaurin-Salvant, two of those vocalists I mentioned, they're both recording currently. Actually, Jasmia Horn is a previous winner of the Sarah Vaughan competition.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one thing I love about jazz music is people are recording so many like things that are indicative of the 40s and the 50s and the 60s are all still being made today with their own spin, you know?
Yeah. Do you think you and Dave Brinnel will be performing together when the pandemic's over?
Oh, 100%. I'm sad. We have our annual show at usually the Red Lion Inn in Stockbridge that probably, I'm guessing, won't be able to happen this year because due to the pandemic. But once things are safe, we will definitely be back especially in Western Mass.
Yeah, but you'll be happy to know that even though a lot of the bars and restaurants and clubs in Western Mass are closed, the Little Berkshire Theater Group down the street from the Red Lion Inn is actually doing an outside performance of Holiday Memories right now where you have to dress up to be in the cold. So it might be possible if the pandemic ends soon enough that you guys could get a late winter, early spring concert here outdoors to launch your album.
That is a great idea.
Yeah, I'll bring the space heaters. How's that?
I've purchased 3 of my own just to bring with me if I go to hang out anywhere outside.
Yeah.
I'm not
So
kidding.
are you able to perform at all these days?
I had been doing some outdoor performances. I actually had some weddings that were still not canceled that were outside, but definitely interesting earlier in the fall. Most things are clearing up right now. At least in the city, it's a little difficult to have outdoor performances. So I'm in some ways thankful to have a break now, just to focus on maybe recording some new things and kind of being able to be creative without deadlines or gigs to, cause stress.
Well, Hailey, we've run out of time, but I want to thank you so much for joining me this morning, and I can't wait to hear the entire CD of your work. The 2 songs that you sent along are fabulous. We're going to play one at the end of the program, but I can't wait to hear the other 6 on that. And good luck to you, and I hope you'll let me know when you win the Sarah Vaughan competition.
Well, we'll see about when, but we'll do, Mark.
Thank you so much. We've been chatting with Hailey Brinnel, who has her career started in Long Meadow, and she's all over the map nationally. We're going to take a break to acknowledge our underwriters that make programming like ArtsBeat possible here on 89.5 FM WSKB and Westfield Community Programming Channel 15. I'm Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our producer today, and we'll be right back after a couple of announcements.
Support for community radio on WSKB provided by Westfield Electroplating. Employing over 140 skilled platers, painters, and technicians, Westfield Electroplating was founded in 1946 and was the first company in the country to achieve National Aerospace and Defense Contractor Program accreditation, proudly maintaining that status for over a decade. Westfield Electroplating provides over 50 quality finishes to meet your corrosion, cosmetic, or performance needs. On the web at www.westfieldplating.com or 413-568-3716. Westfield Electroplating, putting the finishing touches on technology.
Underwriting support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Greater Westfield Chamber of Commerce, the voice of business for the Greater Westfield communities. Informing, educating, advocating, the Chamber provides opportunities for members to make meaningful connections on local, regional, and state levels. For more information on the Chamber's many events, workshops, and programs, as well as the benefits of membership, visit westfieldbiz.org. The Chamber focuses on the most important economy, yours.
Hi, this is Harry Rock, host of Rock on Westfield every fourth Wednesday at 8 a.m. Tune in for my view of this place I call home.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to ArtsBeat, everyone. I'm Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is behind the scenes as our chief engineer this morning. You're listening to us either on Westfield Community Programming Channel 15, 89.5 FM WSKB, or on YouTube on WSKB Community Radio's YouTube page. Our guest for this half hour is Carl Bartels. He's from Springfield. Carl and I got to know each other, we'll just say many years ago, when he was a photographer about town and I was working at the Springfield Symphony and he became the Symphony's photographer. We've been buddies ever since. He decided that Hollywood was going to be much bigger and more exciting than the 413. So he went west. He's developed an incredible career as a cinematographer and a filmmaker. So I'm really glad to get a chance to chat with my buddy Carl Bartels. Good morning, Carl. Carl?
Hello?
Carl, you
Yes,
there?
I am.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. So my first question is for people that knew you in Springfield and don't know you in Springfield. How did the road to Hollywood take place, and what happened once you got there?
Well, it's a kind of really long story, but to make it the Reader's Digest version, as you mentioned, I was a photographer for a long time, probably 10, 11 years. And toward the end of that, stint, I was doing a lot of things around town and also nationally. And one of the things I was doing was called multi-image, which is these really exorbitant, elaborate slideshows where they would you'd shoot it, and then they'd use anywhere from 3 to 25 projectors to have this big corporate, razzle-dazzle show. And one of the things I noticed as I just got hooked on the idea of, big screen, telling a story, and I wanted to explore more of what that was. So, and the other thing was I was really wondering, how do you light big spaces? Because I lit fairly large things, like arenas and things. So I started paying more attention to the movies I was seeing, especially when they had, big interiors, big night exteriors. I would say, how the hell do they light something that big? So I went and started doing seminars. I went to the main workshop for a week, and I immediately saw, you need big lights. Yeah. It was that simple. Or lots and lots of small lights. So, then I just, started reading and reading and reading. And I realized you really can't read. You really just have to go do it. So I decided I needed a little education. So I spent a year at the American Film Institute. I was lucky enough to be accepted there. I was one of 17 out of thousands of applicants who from around the world. And even now, to my knowledge, out of those 17, there are 4 of us who are actually working in the industry. Not doing news photography or whatever they were doing before. And so I feel very fortunate that I was one of those guys. So, and when I got there, let's see, what happened when I got here? Well, I got here, went to school for a year, and I became very broke. So right after film school was very difficult, and I started working my way up through some low-budget things. I don't know if the name Roger Corman rings a bell, but I did a couple of movies with him or his company, and it was a horrible experience. And I said, I don't want to do this anymore. So I started setting my sights on something higher budget. And then just little by little, I built the reel and then a reputation. And then I just started, the last 25 odd years went pretty quickly, actually.
Yeah. I mean, do you, at this point in your career, can you call your own shots and say, I want to do that, or turn down something and say, I don't want to do that? Or are you still facing major competition every time you consider doing something?
It's kind of a two-edged sword. You can always say no. That's that's easy. And I have said no a lot. There are things I'm just not interested in doing. You really can't call all of your own shots unless you're, like a famous actor, or, James Cameron, a famous director or something. But, where I am, which is, I'm in the trenches basically with everybody else. I can sort of propose things to people, and sometimes they say, yeah, let's do that. But it's a very, very difficult door to swing open. You really have to have the connections. Here's an example, not related to my cinematography career, but I've actually written 2 screenplays. And one of them I just wrote and said, okay, that's interesting, and then now it's in a box somewhere. And another one, actually, it was optioned by an English company, and it ended up just before the pandemic hit, and then, of course, it crashed and burned like everything else. But, that was something where, I put the word out that I had this movie, and it was something that I knew Tom Hanks would like, and this English company picked it up and said, we're gonna pitch it, we're gonna, see if we can get this movie made. And so, things like that can happen. It's just a matter of timing, and where we are right now. I heard the tail end of your conversation with Hailey about, what do you do now? It's like, well, you got to wait for the pandemic to go away. So
yeah, I was going to say, how much of your work skidded to a halt during the pandemic?
Oh, all of it. I mean, myself and a couple of my buddies who are also cinematographers, directors. Very few. Here's how it works. My work is, feature films. So that's basically, we're out and about. And all of that is, that just crashed and burned for several months. And it's very slowly coming back online in a limited way. Here's one way it's coming back online. My buddy Ken is currently shooting a series. And what they do is they'll take the entire cast, the entire crew, the entire production team, and they just sequester them on a ranch up in Northridge or somewhere, some horrible place. And they shoot there, they live there, they sleep there, and nobody comes in, nobody leaves until they're done, which means several weeks of this is where you are.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of the theater companies, I taped a show recently with one of the theater companies in the Berkshires that actually went back to live performance in the summer. And the cast and the company of the play were quarantined in a house. They could not leave the house except to go to rehearsal, which was within a 2-block distance, I guess, of where the house was. And they had to take their meals together. They had to be COVID tested. And from the day one of rehearsal till the last day of the performances, there was probably a 6 or 7 week period of time. They were in a bubble.
Yeah, that's exactly how it works. Now, how do people see that performance?
The performance actually was done live, and it was done outdoors in a tent next to the theater, which meant it was weather dependent because you really couldn't do a tent performance if it was pouring down rain or a thunderstorm. The audience was socially distanced away, and instead of having a theater where they could seat 800 people to do the show, I think their capacity was like 60 outdoors. But their persistence and their work with Actors Equity and the health department in the Berkshires allowed them to do it. And another theater as well out there did something very similar. And I guess the payback was that there was an arts and theater going lover who lived in the Berkshires and her family, and they would attend performances like this. And she passed away during the summer, and the family donated $1 million to each of the two theaters to keep them going over the winter months till they could perform again. So
Wow.
there was a happy ending. But I mean, here in the Western Massachusetts, there are a couple of theaters that are streaming stuff from their stages and either writing to be streamed or photographed on stage being performed. But it's dry season until we can all really gather again.
Yeah, and again, like you said, this is just everybody thinking things through and being smart about it, and making it apolitical. That's where the danger is. It's where people are riled up by stupid stuff, and they just don't. They start spreading the virus, and you start over again.
Yeah. I mean, do you worry when you go out and about? I mean, are people in California masking up and stuff, or are people just ignoring the protocols and doing whatever they want?
Well, it's interesting. California is a big place, and in LA or any big city, most everyone is all. It's what you do. You mask up and you go to the store, you get your car fixed, whatever. But in other places where it's more rural, or and a little more remote, where people think, well, there's only 300 of us in town, we're fine, and all of a sudden that town's all got COVID, because they ignore the warnings, and so. But for me, it's just it's what I just met Ken yesterday for coffee, and there's a coffee shop that's opened, only exterior, so if it's raining, no go. No seating inside. We're socially distant, except I know he's been tested, and I know I've been tested. So we're sitting at a table together. We're fine. But, everybody follows the rules. Most stores now, Mark, is like, you don't have a mask, they don't let you in.
Exactly. How long do you think it'll be before the filming projects that you have go back into production? Do you think it's another few months? Do you think it's a year from now? Do you have any indication at this point?
If I knew that, I'd be in the stock market. I don't think anybody really knows. I think everybody was hoping it was going to be October, November, and now all of a sudden it's maybe March. We'll see. I think a lot of it has to do with they're coming up with a what do you call it?
A good vaccine, yeah.
A vaccine, yeah. Age. That's the first thing that goes. The mind is the first thing to go. Yeah. Once they get the vaccine online, which should be a couple months, maybe March, April, I think everybody's going to feel a lot safer going to work, and it's like, okay, I've been vaccinated, I'm fine, so we're not worried about it. And then the number of people contracting the virus is going to be much lower, and even now the death rate has plummeted because they know what to do with it now. Before it was just all hands on deck and
exactly. Switching to another gear, of all of the work that you've done since you've been in Hollywood, and I know that you've done work internationally as well. If there were 2 or 3 projects that meant the most to you that you've done over the years, what would they be?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I get asked what are my favorite movies that I've done, and there's a lot of them. I mean, the very first movie I did, which was this little micro indie with, a director I worked with a lot. We were the crew. He did sound, I did camera, he directed the actors, I did the lighting. I mean, it was like he pushed the dolly, I pulled focus. It was stupid, it was ridiculous, but it won awards, and that was a favorite experience. Is it my favorite movie to watch? Not really, but it really sticks in my memory as a fun, what a way to start a career, just as small as you could possibly get. Black and white film.
Yeah, I mean, very rudimentary.
Oh, extremely. I mean, more rudimentary than anything I've ever done. And on the other end, I mean, I worked on all 3 of the Taken projects with Liam Neeson. And the first one was really great because that was the biggest thing I'd ever done. And the director and I got along really well, and that was a lot of fun. And the third one, which is a different director, but that was 92 million, and it was just such a fun experience to have an unbelievable amount of resources at your disposal, like right in front of you. You know, like we crash a car, and they said, well, the angle wasn't quite right. Well, it was a white Mercedes, so they have 4 of them lined up, ready to go for take 2, 3, and 4. You know.
Oh my gosh! So they blow a couple $100,000 on that take.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, the art department consisted of, you know, in that scene, which took 6 days to shoot, an industrial size forklift that could just pick up a car and move it wherever you wanted it. It was, you know, I'm used to having a couple people on set, a couple art dogs, you know, moving a sofa, and here's this guy moving this incredible, you know, all this shit around. It was crazy.
Yeah, when somebody offers you a project, what appeals to you first? Is it the opportunity to work with the producer or the director or some of the tech crew? Is it the story that appeals to you first? What do you look at first?
Oh, it's always the story. I mean, you know, I was an English major, so I can't help myself. So story is really important. Beyond that, you know, when you get a call from someone you don't know and you don't know the story, that's kind of like, you know, Luke Skywalker walking into the woods, you know, so you're kind of feeling your way around. But when it's somebody you know, like a producer that you've worked with before and you really respect them, and he says, hey, I've got this movie, I want you to shoot it, and blah, blah, and right away you know it's going to be at least a good story, and the people that, because of the reputation, you know that he or she is going to bring good people to work with. So it's going to be a good experience. So, yeah, primarily story, and then secondarily, it's the people who are involved. You know, like, I guess, does that...
Yeah, you work primarily in film, right? Not video.
Oh, no. I mean, the first decade was all film. After 2000, it's I would say 2000 up to 2004 was about half and half. Now it's kind of rare. Like the last film project I shot, it was about 2.5 years ago.
Yeah. Now that you have, there's so many people out there that are capable of shooting video from their phones, you know, and creating things. If you were going to advise somebody that wanted to get into filmmaking the way that you have, how do you tell them to get their start? Is it to craft the right story, or is it to learn the technique? What do you think comes first?
I think it depends on what you want to do. I think most people want to be directors. You know, it's like the joke is, no matter what crew position you are, the T-shirt says, what I really want to do is direct. Okay, so if you're going to be a director, you've got to start with story. And frankly, is that sound, is that you or me?
I don't hear it, so it.
Oh, okay.
It's ambient somewhere in the world.
All right. Anyway, I'll start over again. So if you want to be your goal is to direct. Really, this technique is, I would say it's important, but it's not the most important part of it. The most important part is rigging the emotional content out of the scene, so that you can have the audience react to it and gel with it. If your goal, like what my idea was, to be a cinematographer, now you got to think about lighting, you have to think about composition, you got to think about moving the camera. However, even showing some of the reel, no matter how good your camera moves are, no matter how good your lighting is, no matter how good your composition is, there has to be an inkling of, are you telling a story with your camera? You know, one of the things that I pride myself in was, coming from a still photographer, I had words on the page, but when someone opens a magazine, the first thing they see is the picture. So I want to be able to, in doing a movie, my goal has always been, if you shut the sound off, you get the idea.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that when you and I first started working together, you had taken some photographs of the Springfield skyline at night, which
Hmm.
today would be incredibly outdated. But you took this very dramatic shot of what was then the Bank of Boston building on Court Square with what was then Bay State West behind it, lit at night, the way these buildings looked. And it was kind of the one photograph of downtown Springfield that represented Springfield for like a decade. And I mean, I see it every once in a while. You know, if I go look up something like the Springfield Convention and Visitors Bureau or Skylines of Springfield, it shows up even though it's probably 30 years old. I mean, I think that that skill set that you had really translated from holding a camera in your hands to filming.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a transfer of training there. I learned a lot more since then, but the one thing, this is really interesting you bring this up, more than anything, more than my lighting, which is quite good, and more than my ability to move the camera, I get hired on the basis of my eye, my compositional skills. And I honestly never took an art course. It's just something that I developed over the years unconsciously. Things in the frame feel like they belong in certain places. I have an eye for, I see a line, a diagonal, you know, some kind of compositional element, and I immediately incorporate it without even thinking about it. And I look at some of my older work, even some of the sports stuff, and there's line stuff in there that I didn't even see back in the day. It was just part of the back of my brain, I guess. And you know, that's why I got hired on the Taken series. Was someone saw a short that I had done, and they looked at it and said, "We want you to, you know, to work on our movie." And I was very flattered. And then when they changed directors, I said, "Well, that's it. I probably won't be working on the rest of them." And the director saw my work and said, "We want you." And they kept hiring me back. And they, you know, it was told. I really understood that it was my eye.
Yeah.
And that's something you have to develop an eye. It's just like a musician; you have to develop an ear, and or you just can't do it.
Yeah, it's a critical thing. I mean, if you can't see something in a specific way, then I don't think the audience can. I mean, you are their gateway to a story. If
That's exactly right. Actually,
if you were going to come back to Springfield and they were going to do a Carl Bartels film night at one of the local cinemas, what 3 movies of yours would you like people to see?
oh, I don't know. I guess I really wish you'd asked me that question a week ago. There's probably some of them no one's ever heard of. One was called Blue Hill Avenue, which we actually shot in Canada. It was supposed to be set in Boston. That was kind of a mini epic. And probably the first or last Taken. That was fun. And another one, I don't know, maybe Cappuccino, just because it's so raw.
Yeah, well, of course, anything
And,
with a coffee name in it, I'll go see.
no, well, of course.
Yeah, that would be important. So right now, do you have a couple of projects online coming down the road, or are things still like in a hold status?
No, they're totally in a hold status. I actually been teaching at New York Film Academy for the last couple of years, you know, sort of part-time. And even that slowed way down I had the whole summer off. So things were very, very slow. But that's back online now, at least digitally, you know, remotely. But filming, it's like, no, we're not really. I was in the middle of a short that got shut down because of COVID. We even haven't brought that back up yet. So yeah, it's just dead right now.
Yeah, totally. Are there any do you go to the movies when you're not working in film? Do you ever go just to see what's happening, or to watch a classic or something like that, or do you leave the film business aside when you're not working?
Oh no, can't do that. I have to see movies. I stopped going to the theater about a year ago, just because it was just too much time and too much effort. But we do watch movies all the time.
Yeah, and is there any? I mean, if you were making your list of films that had a significant meaning to you, either personally or professionally, what movies do you go back to watch a second time?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I mean, there's a lot. I would say On the Waterfront was one of the first movies I watched where I could feel the eye of the director. Like I could feel what they were doing, artistically and technically. And so that was a big thing for me. Lawrence of Arabia, obviously, was a big deal. Good question. Alien, oddly, Ridley Scott. Anything Ridley Scott does, most of his story is good. His visuals are always outstanding. Anything David Fincher does, Seven in particular. We were streaming House of Cards for a while, and again another David Fincher hand. Then there's a lot of things I learned. I first really started understanding how movies were being made, story and picture, back in the 70s. I saw things earlier than that, but didn't echo. But back in the 70s, there were these movies that they did in a couple of weeks. Sidney Pollack, Robert Redford, things like 3 Days of the Condor, or with Gene Hackman, like Bonnie and Clyde, things like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, some of those movies from when we were high school and college years, like Bonnie and Clyde, the way that was filmed always stuck out in my mind as a theater person because it had the right kind of drama to it. I'm not a regular moviegoer anymore. I kind of spend my time watching theater, although during the pandemic, I've screened a lot of things I haven't seen over the years. But I tend to hark back to the 60s and 70s of some of the films that have really left an impact.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting? We were just talking about this the other night, my wife and I. There's a movie she has never seen. It was done with Al Pacino and Gene Hackman. It's called Scarecrow. Does that ring a bell?
I remember it. I remember the movie poster. I don't think I've seen it.
Yeah, it's actually it was this really small little indie, just basically the two of them and a couple of other people road movie, and it's just all acting. It's just all this dramatic and what happens is the characters. Gene Hackman's character is this angry guy, and Al Pacino's character is kind of like a little wishy-washy. He's trying to calm his buddy down, and they're who they have. They love each other, they hate each other, but they're all they have. And during the course of the movie, they switch places. Where Al Pacino's character becomes angry, and then Gene Hackman's character says, "It's okay, buddy. It's okay. We're going to be fine." And it's such a lovely, heartfelt piece. And again, it's like these kinds of stories. You're always attracted to the story.
Well, Carl Bartels, we're out of time, but I want to thank you for joining us. I mean, and we are 2 years overdue having lunch. So when you come back east, which I hope you will some point, pandemic or not, we need to get together and socially distance, have a lunch and a real catch-up.
There you go.
There you go.
I'm all over that.
Okay, we've been chatting with Carl Bartels, the filmmaker. We're going to leave you today with one of Hailey Brinnel's songs from her upcoming album. This is ArtsBeat. Peter Coles has been our chief engineer today. I'm Mark Auerbach. You're either listening to us on 89.5 FM WSKB, Westfield Community Programming Channel 15, or catching us on YouTube. See you next Friday at 8 o'clock. Have a good weekend.
To love, so easy to idolize all others above, so worth the yearning for, so swell to keep every home fire burning for, and we'd be so grand at the game, so carefree together that it does seem a shame that you can't see your future with me, 'cause you'd be oh so easy to love. So easy to idolize all others above, and so where the yearning for, so still to keep every